Hello everyone and welcome to the St. George Library Speaker Series. Our guest today is the author Jonathan Exaros. This is the third presentation this year in the Library Speaker Series, and we're already lining up our presentations for next year. If you're visiting us today, please take a moment before you leave to sign our guest book. The St. George Library is a lending library staffed with volunteers who regularly meet Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. It's a good day to stop by, but I would call first just to make sure. Our story today begins when Father Dimitri first started here 2 Glendies ago. Father Mike had left some books in the office, and they were being cleaned out. And Joyce Tripotsis walked by, and she saw this book in a box. And she says, "Hey, Maletti, I'd like to take this home. It looks interesting." And I'm thinking, well, we haven't even cataloged it yet. But she said, "Look, there's a letter in here." And as it turns out, the letter was from Jonathan, who had written to the church and said, "My grandparents came to Manchester, New Hampshire, and I'm sending you this book. I researched and wrote the story." And Joyce liked the book so much that she told me, and I started reading it. And then Linda Martin went crazy on it. She says, "My family's from Videographer." And so she read it. She donated an extra copy here. She bought another copy to seed into the community, to the other churches, and to the society through Arthur Bercolis. We were here when he came. Arthur's the president of Yetino Society. So there's also another side of this, and I'm not going to steal the thunder because I think Jonathan might be talking about it. But many of you who listen to Grecian Echoes realize that Jimmy Exarchopoulos used to have his own radio program there, and I met Jimmy many years ago. The nicest man you could ever meet, and a natural storyteller. It's just, when he opened up, he just lit up the room, and the stories came out. And this is what you're going to find today in Jonathan. So we want to welcome him here. Jonathan Exaros is a martial artist with over 50 years of experience and over 40 years of teaching students of all ages. He graduated from Moravian College in 1989, and he worked in corporate America. Corporate America for 6 years while building his martial arts school, and then walked away from the company to run his academy and teach full-time. A lifelong student of history, world religions, and philosophy, he is the author of A Teacher's Inspiration, Methods of a Martial Artist, and A Village Murder, which is the true story of the double murder of his ancestors. Jonathan lives in Warrington, Pennsylvania, and is married with 2 adult children. Let's please welcome Mr. Jonathan Exaros.
Go on, let's see if this works. Testing, can you hear me okay? Okay, all right, thank you. Want to start off by asking you, did you happen to have a family photo like this in your parents' or grandparents' home, or maybe your home now? It's been passed down generation after generation. This is the photo that started me on this journey of discovery as to what happened to my ancestors. This photo is hanging in my grandparents' home. They lived in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which was really close to where we lived, about an hour away, and we'd spend all of our holidays there, Orthodox Easter, Christmas, all the birthdays and everything. And my grandmother had in the house this plush blue carpet. I remember this carpet, and you could stick your fingers deep into it. I have no idea how she kept it clean. It was immaculate, but the stairwell going up to the second floor, this picture was hanging there, and I would play on the steps at the age of 6 and 7 with my little toy soldiers. The carpet made a great hiding place for the snipers, And while I was playing, I would always look up at this picture. There were other pictures on the wall of other ancestors and family members, but this picture, I just kept staring at it and staring at it. And every time we'd go, I would look at this photo. And one time I caught my father coming down the steps, and I said, "Dad, who are these people?" And he told me, "This is your grandfather, Plato." Okay, so I knew who that was. Okay, I like this photo because I love the little soldier or the sailor outfits, And he listed my uncles and aunts that are in the photo as well, who I all knew. My grandmother Calliope, who's from Pentalifos, okay, who he said I met, but I was too young to remember. And this is my great-grandfather Alexander. I have his name as my middle name, and my father's name is Alexander as well. Then my father turns to me and he says, he was beheaded. I'm 6 years old and I hear he's beheaded. I said, why? I'm not sure. I think bad guys got to him, he said. So this became a mystery to me right off the bat, and I said, well, how can we find out what happened to great-grandpa? I said, why don't we ask Grandpa? He said, I don't think it's a good idea. Don't ask him. So this stayed with me all through my childhood. Every time I'd go to my grandparents' house, I would stop and stare at this photo and wonder, was he a criminal? Was he in a war? Did somebody do something bad to him and steal from him and then kill him? All these questions left unanswered for me. Some of you might remember, and Maletti was just talking about my Uncle Jimmy Exaros, who did the WNTN program. What a handsome dude he is, right? Was. He unfortunately passed away a little over a year ago. My favorite uncle in the whole wide world. He owned pizza restaurants all through Massachusetts, and especially the one that I remember was the one on Cape Cod. We'd vacation there for a couple of weeks in August. And we would go, and when I was a kid, we'd visit him one time while we were there for the 2 weeks, and my dad got a chance to speak Greek. You know, he didn't get a chance to do that very often, but he would, like, you know, rap in Greek with Uncle Jimmy. And when I got a car, and I was able to drive at the age of 16, I found myself on the Cape for those 2 weeks, traveling to Uncle Jimmy's restaurant about 3 times during the week for lunches. Not only for the free pizza, because he wouldn't let you pay for anything, but also because of the stories that he would tell. This picture is interesting because this was the very day that he told me of the story of what happened to my great-grandfather. He sat me down during a lull in the action of the restaurant. I'd finished eating. This is his daughter, by the way, Maria. We just did a little family reunion with her a couple nights ago. Sits me down and he starts telling me this story. He says, I want to tell you the story of what happened to your great-grandfather. And he tells me that the villagers were building a school in the village for the kids. And while they were digging the foundation, they came upon a lime pit. Okay, now, again, a lot of questions. A lime pit in the middle? I didn't understand any of that. But the villagers all had a discussion. What should we do with this? We can all bag it up. We could sell it ourselves, make a little bit of money. And the Exarchopoulos, who were like leaders of the village, the more prominent people of the village, said, no, we're going to sell it and we're going to fund the school. Well, one of the villagers didn't like that idea, and he went and he stole some of the lime in the middle of the night. One of our relatives, my Uncle Jimmy tells me, one of our relatives caught him. A fight broke out. There was a fist fight. And our relative bit the nose completely off of this man during the fight. Now, back then, you didn't have plastic surgery to fix something like that. So this poor fella is now with a hole in his face. Unless he's wearing a mask, he probably could never get married, right, at the time. Who's going to marry him? He's lost face within the village because he got caught stealing. And he leaves the village and gets bandits together, and he swears vengeance on the Exarchopoulos family, comes back into the village, and executes my great-grandfather. This is the story my Uncle Jimmy's telling me. There's a whole lot he didn't know, by the way. Okay? I found out through my research it was his own father that bit the nose off of this man, and he never knew it until I found that information out. Okay? So what do I do here? I'm back then I was a handsome 16-year-old boy. I'm finishing my schooling. I'm into girls. I'm ready to go to college. I go to college, I graduate, and then as Maletti explained, I got the job, I start my business, I got married, I had a couple kids, but this story stuck with me. My Uncle Jimmy also told me the name of the person who killed my great-grandfather as being a man by the name of Forfolios. That stuck with me too, all those years. Forfolios. Okay, Forfolios. So where do I start with this story? How do I piece this together? When I was, back in 1916, 17, I decided I need to do a family research. I need to find out information. And I started with Ancestry, okay? this is where I started with my Ancestry.com. My grandfather up here, Plato, and his wife, my dad, my Uncle Bill. He only had 2 children, and then this is us. And then under here, you see the little dots here. The kids are under here, okay, our kids and everything. This is where it started. I started here. I knew more of the family tree because I'd done a family tree ancestry for like high school and stuff like that. I had more names, but this is where it started. Now, when I tell you that I reached out to these people and also through Ancestry, and I started asking questions, first of all, everybody knew of the story of this beheading of my great-grandfather, okay? They knew of that story, and it was all a little bit different, and they were giving me what? Pictures and photos and dates of birth and death of all the relatives. The next 3 photos I'm going to show you, see, if I tried to put my entire family tree just in the Exarchopolis line alone, it would fill this entire wall, okay? So the next 3 pictures, one, that goes side by side to this, that goes side by side to this. And I did that all in 1 year. And it's still growing. Actually, I have it all filled out. I have some pictures that are missing, and I'm still waiting on some dates, but I got all the names of my great-great-grandfather's lineage straight down 6 generations, okay? Now, in the process of doing all this, like I said, people are telling me the story. The story's a little different every time. How the bandits got brought to justice was a little bit different. So I needed to go to Evgenino. I needed to go to Greece and see if I can find out some more information here. So I go to Evgenino, and I was really nervous going. My Greek, although I spoke it fluently as a little kid, I lost it. My mom is not Greek, and then my parents didn't speak it in the household anymore, so I lost it. It did come back to me, by the way, and I do understand. Don't say bad things about me, because I might understand what you're saying. You know, I go into the village, and here I am, and everything I've learned about the village from my parents from like 50 years ago, 52 years ago when we were there. Oh, it's so rustic. There's no running water except for this, blah, blah, blah. They're going on and on. I was so nervous going there because I'm taking my wife, my kids. They're going to be miserable for 3 days while I'm doing. Absolutely gorgeous. Both of my teenage children at the time told me, Dad, we got to get a house here. We got to stay here in the summers. And I said, kids, you're going to be bored after 2 days, you know. But it was just unbelievable. If you get a chance to go back and visit your family village, please do so, because you'll be very, very surprised at it. Anyway, met the mayor of Evgenino in the Cafaneo through a translator, which happened to be one of my cousins. Come to find out, the mayor is one of my cousins, distant cousin. I can place him on the family tree. And I asked him the questions about, I started asking questions about this murder that took place. And you got to remember, I'm also quite nervous because I don't know who I'm asking. I might be asking a descendant of the person with no nose who still has a grudge against the Exarab. I don't know this, right? So I'm being cautious about how I ask these questions. He comes out with this photo and also articles about the murder. And in the article, there was a second person who was murdered at the same time. And that was this gentleman right here, my great-great-grandfather. They were murdered side by side to each other, Manolis Exarchopoulos and his son Alexander. He gave me this photo, and a lot of other relatives in the photo, and I snapped pictures of the articles that he gave me. Now what do? I take them home, and now I got to get these articles translated. Nobody could translate them. They were in old style Greek that nobody could really understand. So I went online, and by the way, when I tell you about this research that I've done, anybody can do this research. I'm nothing special. I'm not a scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I just barely made it through college. I was so happy on the last day. Oh, I made it, 4 years. So it's anything that anybody can do, and I just looked up, people who could do translations for me, and I found a Greek scholar in Crete by the name of Minkle, and I sent him the articles, and I told him the story. He was so taken by the story that he did more research over there in Greece, found more articles, found magazine articles, and almost like dime store novels of this story that occurred. And he translated it all for me, and now I had all this ton of information a lot of it was still conflicting. Even the magazine articles conflicted each other. Some of them, like a dime store novel from the Old West, they exaggerate things, So anyway, I was on the road to piecing this thing together. How do I write the story then? Well, first I wanted to find out why my great-grandparents came to America to begin with. Why were they in Manchester, from the little village of Guédinon to Manchester, okay? Oh, by the way, before I did that, I found the graves in the village. You can see the two crosses. On the crosses are the names of those two gentlemen, my great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather, and it says underneath it their date of death, the same exact date, and it says killed by bandits, okay? When I tell you that the village is just absolutely gorgeous, this isn't the village, this is out the back of the village, off the back of the graveyard. You can see the church right here, the top of the church. It looks like something out of a Little House on the Prairie episode, it's just gorgeous. Farmers are still farming the area, and the shepherds are still sheep herding in that area as well. So anyway, decided to talk about, or to do some research on the immigration process and how my great-grandparents came to this country. This is a photo of my great-grandmother, Calliope. She was a twin. They look like they're in their 20s, right? Like 25, 27 years old. They're 14 years old when this picture was taken. Everybody looked older back then, right, when you look at these photos. The picture was taken before they left Greece. She lied, or the family lied on the documents and said that she was 15. You had to be 15 years old to come across without your parents. And she came with her best friend, Chrissy. And her betrothed husband, the husband-to-be, was already here 3 months earlier. She's from Pantalafos. He was from Guédinon. And he was already here, immigrated here on his own at the age of 17. Okay, so they came to Manchester first, and I found all this information out with all the records that we had, finding records on Ancestry, Ellis Island records, including the ship that they came over on, the USS Oceana. And where do I find that? Wikipedia. It's easy. Just go to Wikipedia. If I knew the ship, and I go, and I have a picture of the ship that she came on. When I did my research on the immigration process, many of us, when we were in high school or junior high and we heard about immigration, what did we learn about that? Oh, they came over, they went through Ellis Island, they got checked, and then they were on their way. The process of immigration was horrendous. Just getting from your village to the docks of Piraeus was an adventure. Getting from there and going on these ships, and you can imagine this is a little village girl from the Joriot who's never seen a big tall building, let alone a ship like this, and what that was like. And then being in these ships and going through. So I wanted to write this story of what it was like to be an immigrant and to come to this country, the sacrifices that were made and the adventure. Could you imagine sending your 14-year-old across the ocean? Go make some money. Well, and back then you had 10 other 14-year-olds, or 10 other kids, so, that's what they did. They just sent a couple of them. In the early 1900s also, a lot of Greeks immigrated here. It was a big thing. They were sending 2 or 3 of their children here to the United States, and they just settled mostly, a lot of them here in Manchester. This is my great-grandfather, Alexander, probably an 18-year-old, in the shoe factory. This was given to me by a relative. When you start talking to relatives, they got pictures and stuff and they give, and I was like, this was gold. I mean, all the pictures of that time are what? They're family portraits. You never see a picture of somebody actually working in the factory. So this was right here in Manchester probably before he had kids, right after he got married, and before they moved to Marlborough. Okay. This is the last photo taken, family photo. This was taken in Marlborough. Of the family, and you can see my grandfather, handsome guy, Calliope. My grandfather, Plato, was 11 years old. This picture was taken before they went back to Greece. And I talk about why they went back to Greece in the book. This is their passport photo. The passport photo was a family passport photo. So cool, right? And this is the last known photo that was taken before the murder took place. And things like this, like my grandfather, this was found in my grandfather's belongings that were given to me after he passed away. And the dates, where they landed, in Greece, where they departed from Greece, same coming back from Greece or from Europe into the United States, and you just match that up with Ancestry, you match it up with the Ellis Island records, and that's how it works. This was a article from Boston, I think it was the Boston Globe, about the killing that took place. And again, this is all I got. There was more to it. This is all that was given to me. But this had some misinformation as well. It was all different. All the information that I got was different. So that Greek scholar from Crete, when he sent me all this information and he sent me the articles, he also sent me this photo of the murderer who did the murders. I came finally face to face with the person who killed my great-grandfather and great-grandfather. Christos Forfolios is his name. The articles described who these men were and what they were doing. They were acting like a modern-day mafia, coming across here and stealing from the traders from back and forth from the villages, holding people ransom. They would send letters to the villages and say, if you do not pay our taxes to us for your protection, we have no problem with killing the children of the village. And they did that with these stamps. They would stamp on their envelopes these ominous, stamps to just kind of scare the people, at that time. You could see this one here from Christos has the gun and the sword and stuff like that. It's threatening. They were threatening people. The interesting thing about the articles was it opened up a whole world for me to be able to also tell the story of how these men were brought to justice, who they were, how they got their start in crime, and then how they were taken into justice or killed. Some of them were brought to justice and jailed, and some of them were killed, by a gentleman by the name of Marcos Trimpos. I wrote about him in the book as well. I want to find out more information about this guy. He was a bandit killer. He just was assigned from the military to go all over the country of Greece, through Lefkada, Athens, hunt these people down, these Albanian bandits, and bring them to justice in some way, shape, or form. Had no problem with killing them and putting their heads on spikes as a warning to the rest of, the Albania, hey, don't come to our country, you're not welcome here. And that's what they did. This photo was taken after the murders took place. This again was given to me by a relative. You can see there's one child missing. I'll talk about that in a second. Here's Plato with his 1,000-yard stare on his face. And you could see the anguish in his little brother Jimmy's eyes. Aunt Tina, my Aunt Tina, has no memory of this, of anything. I was talking to my Aunt Carol last night, her daughter, and for all those years she would ask about her, and she had absolutely no memory. She was only 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old when the murders took place. She was so stricken with post-traumatic stress that she just wiped everything out, And then here's Calliope. Look how lost she looks. Took her a year to save the money, and they actually sold the house that they had purchased in Efgerino to be able to go back to America. She didn't want to stay in Greece. Matter of fact, she didn't want to go back to Greece to begin with. She had a premonition something bad was going to happen, and sure enough it did. So where's the third or the fourth child? That's my Uncle John. I had a rich great-uncle Costas. Alexander's older brother Costas was obviously the oldest brother in the family, so he gets most of the wealth and yada, yada, yada. He had apartment complexes that he rented out in Thessaloniki, and he was pretty wealthy. And so he told Calliope, leave Plato with me when you go back to the United States, and I will ensure he gets the best education money can buy. Then I'll send him back to the United States, and then he can help the family make money. Well, she said, no, I need him now. 12-year-old kid, and she needs him now to help make money for the family and put food on the table. And this is just prior, within months of when the Great Depression hit, okay? So Uncle John is not here in this picture. He was already in Thessaloniki getting his education. Okay. They immigrated back on, I found the ship again, different ship, the SS Leviathan. Okay, Leviathan means sea monster, right? I don't know if I'd get on a ship called the Sea Monster, to tell you the truth. But it might be better being on a sea monster than getting attacked by a sea monster. But these are the cool things you can find when you do your ancestry research and when you start to dig into these things. More modern. This is 1929. When the picture was taken. And this is my Uncle John, who was left with Uncle Costas and Aunt Maria. By all accounts, there was something wrong with Aunt Maria. I think that she probably suffered from schizophrenia, some type of a mental disorder. She was very abusive to my uncle. There are stories of him leaning out of the balcony over the streets, asking the people passing by for food. Can you throw me up some food? And Uncle Costas, he is an oddball too, by all accounts as well. But he was probably just into, at that time, he's the breadwinner. He's doing this. Just listen to your aunt and do what you have to do. So he did get his education in Greece, and this is probably, my guess is this is his graduation photo. Okay, they took this photo when he graduated. The very next day, he ran away, hopped on a ship as a stowaway. Okay, and the captain's crew, when they found him, they brought him to the captain, and he was taken so much by this story of him and how his grandfather and his father were murdered and how his mother left him with this evil uncle and aunt to get his education. He actually put him to work on the ship as a 17-year-old. And while he was working there, that's where he learned how to cook. And he became a chef. He actually became a master chef, and he would just travel and cook and this type of thing. The captain also helped him to get his passport in France. His name in the passport is Jean, which is John in French, the French for John. And the interesting thing is when I wrote this book, and I'm piecing everything together and I'm putting it together with the dates, because that's the important thing. You look at the dates. Look at the dates of when they landed, what they did from here to there, birth dates of the kids, and you can map out and see exactly what the story is. Uncle John was born on the 4th of July. Okay, that was a big thing for the family. As the second child born on the 4th of July here in America, or second American child, it was such a cool thing for the family. It was celebrated. When he landed on Ellis Island, coming back after this horrendous experience, he landed on his 18th birthday on the 4th of July on Ellis Island. I had a difficult time putting that in the book because I thought somebody reading this is going to think I'm just being corny and I'm making this up, So I actually included, and those of you who read the book, you've probably seen this picture. I've included this in the book to kind of show, this is what happened. This coincidence, it just occurred. So it was just a tremendous coincidence, and that's the ship manifest, and or the manifest, I guess, from Ellis Island. And you can find all that stuff if you just go to Ellis Island and Google up your parents and your grandparents. You'll be able to find them if they ever cross through there. So piecing together the book, when I wrote this book, I could have very easily just done a chronological journal and passed it down to my relatives and leave it, for my kids and my grandkids if I ever have them. I decided that I wanted to write this book because, I got this fascinating story, but you all have these same stories. If you go up and you look at your ancestry, they all have the same types of stories, stories of immigration, stories of survival. Everybody has a wonderful story to tell, and that's interesting and fascinating. I wanted to write this in a way that anybody would be able to read it, not just my family. Who cares about my family? You got your own stories to tell. Okay, so I wanted to write it in a way that actually brought the reader into the scene. And I have to say that I'm almost apologetic about the murder scene that I wrote. That took me about 2 weeks to write, and I will tell you I had nightmares writing it because I had to envision what happened, how it occurred, the fact that my grandmother told me that her husband, Plato, was a witness to those murders and was made to carry the bodies back to the village as a warning to the rest of the family. The interesting thing with that story, and I told this to the relatives, that's the only source I have for that particular part of the story. None of the magazine articles or any of the newspaper articles mentioned my grandfather Plato as being a witness. The only person to tell me this was my grandmother. You see, so I lived with my grandparents in Bethlehem the last year I was in college, and my college was in walking distance to their house, so I spent a lot of time with them. And I asked my grandfather, I got the nerve to finally ask him, what happened to your father, Grandpa? And he just looked down and he said, he was beheaded, is what he said. I don't, never mentioned about his grandfather, I then asked my grandmother, and that's when she said what she said. She told me that he was a witness. So writing this in there, I had to use my imagination. How does an 11-year-old boy carry two beheaded bodies back to the village? And I actually went to the murder site. I trekked to the murder site. It's about 2.5 miles away, walking distance. We had to carry canes with us because if the dogs the shepherd's dogs, they'll actually bite you and attack you. So we were worried that they could, attack us. So we had to go and carry the canes with us. It's a little bit of a distance. How is this 11-year-old boy going to bring these bodies back? When we were there, and I was talking about it with one of my cousins, they had carts and donkeys back then. So they probably traveled to the area with these donkey carts and stuff, and he was made to load them up. Well, how does an 11-year-old a person load a body up into the carts? And the bandits are making. So all these things went through my head as I'm writing this, and I had nightmares doing it. It's if those of you who haven't read the book, it's a graphic scene, but it was necessary because I want the person who's reading this to feel what these people felt, feel what it was like to be in the hull of a ship, the smells of the ship, not showering for like over 10 days. And feeling gross, getting off the ship and standing on these lengthy lines to get checked by the doctors, and then finally being released in the United States to somehow get here to Manchester. So anyway, I was telling this story yesterday in Marlborough. We had a small intimate group and we were going through this as well. And I was saying that, I've accomplished a lot of things in my life that I'm very, very proud of, but I'm a perfectionist. And everything's got to be just right. And I could never, with my martial arts, with my school, with what I did, I could never quite hit the mark of perfection with what I was doing, even with my own physical prowess and my weight training and what I could do with my body, and never could quite get there. This thing came the closest to perfect that I've ever done. And to be able to do this and honor your ancestors, to me, is the most important thing. When we think about our ancestors, we're so connected to them, even if we don't realize it. I'm finding that out even more now because I'm going through some things with genetic testing for heart conditions and all this. We're connected to our ancestors, and to honor our ancestors by remembering who they were and telling the stories and passing these stories down to your family members or to other people, I think is incredibly important. My great-great-grandfather Manolis had no idea that his great-great-grandson Jonathan Exaros was going to write his story and tell this story to the world, whoever wants to hear it. So that is my story, and if you have any questions, I would love to answer them. So, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about my research or what to do, where to go? Yes, sir.
So your book have a thing about the guy that brought them to justice?
Yes.
What was it? He was a general. Oh, no, he was in the army.
He was that. Great question. Yes, he was in the military. I think he was a major, and he was given this assignment. His name was Marco Trimpos, and he was given this assignment to go and track down the bandits and to use any method possible. Back then, they would gather up, just like here in the West, a posse. So they go into the town and they would say, we have to get these guys. So you would have a couple of what they call gendarmes or soldiers with him. And then what he would do is he would gather up the other villagers, whoever wanted to go. And who wouldn't go on that? Everything in the village is boring except for, what you're doing with your, farming and that type of thing. So, oh yeah, let's go get the bad guys, So that's what they would do. And he would travel from place to place. And I have a whole chapter on him, just on him alone. And then there's a chapter also about how he brought these Christos Forfolios to justice in there as well. But I would really like to get more information on him. I tried looking up information on Marcos Trimpos. I can't find it. There's a million, again, it's a common name. So I'm trying to find more information because I'd love to write his story, just a book on him alone, And that's the other thing. By the way, when you write a story like this, all of a sudden all these other stories start to come together in fruition, The story of my Uncle John, I had no idea how I was going to end this book. I mean, it was going to be a pretty boring ending of my grandfather, going into the Navy and learning accounting, and then he became an accountant, had 2 sons, and then he died when he was, in his 80s, It's not too exciting of a book, but in the process, I found all this information about my Uncle John. And I said, wow, this would make a great ending to the book. So again, you get these spin-off stories about these people. And Marcos was really, I loved writing about him and reading about him. It was really cool. Cool dude. Yes, Melita.
How did you find the scholar in Greece? Did they find you, or did you find them?
I found them. I looked up online translators. I just did a Google search on translating. I needed to translate Greek to English. And then I interviewed a few people online. And, he told me he could definitely do it. You pay a little fee, for his services per page that he's spending his time on. And then he went from there. I mean, he didn't even charge me for some of the stuff that he did. He got so into it that he just sent me all these other articles. Yeah, here it is, Jonathan, you got it. And sent me on my way.
So he wasn't from Avgerinos, you said he was from Crete?
Crete, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he lives in Crete.
Maybe there are some people from Avgerinos that have access to the library there can help you with more information.
Yes.
The man with no nose.
Yeah, the man with no nose, yeah. The man with no nose, by the way, was not mentioned in any of the articles either, by the way. There were a lot of other bandits that were there, but this man was not mentioned. This was just family lore that was passed down, that everybody knew the story, or many of them did. Like I said, I found out that it was my Uncle Jimmy's own father that did that, He didn't know. He had no idea. Yep. Yeah. So there, even like with the, how the bandits were taken to justice, things like, exaggerated stories of a poisoned pie or somebody got killed while roasting a lamb and all these other things. And, I had to tone down some of the crazy and, write it in a way that made a little bit more sense, But I did have to use my creative juices. I had to, use my creativity and my imagination. All the dialogue between people, with the exception of what occurred in letters, because I did have letters that were written. My great-grandfather was begging my great-great-grandfather, Manolis, was begging Alexander to bring the family back. I want you to bring them back. We're going to have your family here. I want to see my grandkids. He said, I don't want to go back. They're having, they're in school here. They have good schools in Marlborough. And he says, well, I'm going to build you a school. Okay, that's why they were building the school back then. I'm going to build you a house. And then he ran out of excuses, and that's when they immigrated back, and that's when this happened. So I had those letters. Some of these letters, I had letters from Calliope. She became a hero to the village. Here's a woman who comes back without her husband to the States, and yet she took her money, and she was constantly sending it back to the kids. Shoes and dolls and candy and this type of thing, and sending it back to the kids of the village. And all the kids of the village just remember Grandma Calliope. She was their hero, And this is a woman who could hardly put food on her own table. Plato and Jimmy are out there, with a paper route and sweeping up stores and stuff like that to make extra money just to put bread on the table. So you find that You know, we're spoiled these days, aren't we? You know, with the things that we do, and the pandemic that just occurred. My wife is from Laos and Thailand. Spent 11 years in a Thai refugee camp after escaping communist Laos, and lived in horrific conditions. She's seen people die, and when this pandemic hit, she said, "This is a breeze. All you got to do is you put a mask on and you go about your thing and you get your shot, and what's the big deal? What is everybody complaining about? It's nothing compared to what I went through. It's nothing compared to what these people went through." I met a woman that I actually met her online. She wrote a book after she read my book. She got so into what she was doing, it inspired her to write her own story of what she went through as a 3, 4, 6-year-old at that era during Nazi-occupied Greece, and how she was starving this whole time. And she says the same thing, you know, Americans have nothing to complain about. We're so spoiled, you know, and it's a good thing. I'm happy to be spoiled. I don't want to go through these things, you know, but to be able to appreciate them and understand them, and it comes from listening to people's stories. It comes from understanding what our ancestors went through, and it gives you an appreciation for what we have. I think that's very important. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Yes? Yes, sir.
The first of your generation to hear the story of the beheading, or was it relayed? I mean, did Jimmy's children hear the story before you, or were you?
I believe I was the first.
Why did he pick you? Why do you?
Well, I am the oldest of the cousins, you know, and he also recognized that I had an interest in this. I have an interest in family, and you know, the rest of, you know, a lot of siblings. I spent a lot of time with all my grandparents. When I'd go and visit my grandparents on my mother's side, or the family of my mother's side, I would always make sure I went and I visited my grandmother. I lived with, like I said, my grandparents when I was in college. When I was in college, I'd go every weekend for dinners and stuff. I just wanted to be around my family. And Uncle Jimmy recognized that, I guess, and you know, he said, "You're the one who's doing this." And then all of a sudden, when I started doing more research, I had relatives in Afghanistan who didn't really know me, who were asking questions. Who's this Americano? Who's this Americano who's writing this story or inquiring about this story? And they thought I was my father. They thought I was Alex. You know, they didn't realize it was the grandson of Plato, not the son of Plato, that was doing this. So it was something where even Maria, my Uncle Jimmy's daughter, said that he was so taken by the fact that although I grew up Greek, I went to the Orthodox Church, I went to Greek school, I spoke Greek fluently when I was really, really young, but they look at me, because I'm half Greek, they look at me as I'm not really Greek, you know. Not really, who's this guy who's not quite Greek, you know, telling this Greek story, you know. So but it's, you know, it's family. It's family, it's ancestry, and I'm a firm believer in that. And now when I do this, it's more, you know, when I speak like this today, it's more about trying to inspire other people to do your research as well, and to keep these stories alive, write them down, pass them down to others. It is so important to do that. And the work that Maletti is doing to make sure that we have these historical documents and everything, we don't want to lose that. You really don't. It's difficult enough when you have all these children and only one of them takes an interest. You know, it's difficult to keep that going, because without that one, you know, everybody else would just let it go, and nobody would know these stories or what happened to these people. You know, so I think that's incredibly important. So thank you very much for having me today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy the book. Okay, thank you.